Hey guys, I'm Yon Marie and welcome to my channel. So today we are doing part 2 of my two-part series on how to reuse old book covers to create new books. So in part 1 I showed you guys how to remove the book cover from the rest of the book, and then I also showed you guys how you can use tissue paper to make your book covers look brand new. If you haven't seen part 1, I would really recommend you guys to first go and watch that one. I will link it here above somewhere and then also in the description box below. So in this video, I'm going to show you guys how you can create your own text block, which is all the pages that goes inside the book. And I'm also going to show you guys how to add your own bookmarks and how to put everything together to create your own brand new book. Create your own old new. Okay, let's get into part 2 of how to reuse old book covers to create new books. To create the text blocks, I used 160 GSM plain white A4 paper. The first thing we need to do is work out how long and wide the pages should be cut to fit inside the book cover. The length of an A4 page already fits perfectly in this book cover, so we just need to get the width. To do that, I placed my steel ruler inside the cover and measured the width that is needed. Multiply this measurement by 2, because we're later going to fold these pages in half to make the booklets. Measure out the width on one of the pages and mark where you'll need to cut. Now place the piece of paper in front of all the other pages. We're going to cut off one edge of all the pages with a precision knife. Make sure that all the pages are very neatly stacked behind each other. Clip the ends of the pages together on the side that's not going to be cut using binder clips. I placed a cutting mat underneath the pages and then taped my steel ruler to the pages where I'm going to be cutting to ensure that I get a clean edge. And then I just went in with my precision knife and repeatedly cut on the line where the ruler is. Keep some of the cut off pieces to use for later. I slowly removed the ruler from the pages. It's okay if it tears a bit. Just make sure to have this page in the very front of the book later on. You'll see why. This method worked surprisingly well, but I am going to try a different method for cutting the paper of the second book we're going to make, just to give you guys some options. Again, measure the length and width of what the pages need to be. Make sure that you multiply the width measurement by 2. For this book, I decided to make a bullet journal, so I printed out dots on the paper. You can just go to gridsley.com to get the dot grid. Because there were dots on the pages, I just used them as my guide while using my paper cutter. Now I didn't measure out every single page and then cut it. That would take even longer than what this already took. Instead, I just placed the cut piece of paper on top of the next page and marked roughly where I need to cut. Remember, I'm using the dots as my guide to get the exact place of where I need to cut. The markings are just to help me know which row of dots. I did this with the rest of all the pages. Yeah, I know, it was a lot of pages. I'd really recommend you guys rather do the other method that I used. Now it's time to make the booklets. For the thinner book, I decided to have 4 pages in each booklet. Take one of the 4 pages and measure and mark the center. Now on the center line that you drew, you're gonna mark where you're going to sew the pages together. The measurements of the markings will depend on how wide the page is. There has to be an even number of markings. I'll explain why later. For this page I made a marking every 1.5 centimeters. Now put that page in front of the other 3 and neatly stack them together. Clip the pages together using binder clips. Put something underneath the pages to prevent the surface from getting damaged. We're gonna hammer a needle through the pages. Cut off a piece of white thread about 60 to 70 centimeters long. Pull the thread through the needle until the ends are equally long. Tie both strings together in a knot. Take a small hammer and hammer in the needle on the first marking. If you don't have a small hammer, you can use a steel ruler as I did in my first bookmaking video, or something similar. Pull the needle through. Now we're going to keep hammering the needle through the other markings, but we're not going to pull it through. We just want to make holes so that it's easier to sew in a few minutes. The reason why we pulled it through the first hole is so that we don't lose the needle or let it fall. When we have all the holes, we can start sewing. The reason why the holes had to be an even number is so that the ends of the thread are on the same side of the booklet. Once the pages are sewn together, tie the thread in a knot. Pull on the loop to get the knot as close to the paper as possible. I usually make a double knot for extra security. Now just snip off the extra thread. Now you just need to repeat this process for the rest of the booklets. If you measured out a long enough piece of string previously, you should have enough left over for another booklet. But before you start sewing, make sure that the leftover thread will be enough. It should be at least 1.5 times the width of the paper. If you don't want to sew the thread through the first hole before all the holes are made, which will leave less room for mistakes, then you can just use either the same or a different needle without thread. This way, if a needle gets damaged, you can keep using the damaged one to make the holes and spare your other needles. For the thin book, I created 4 booklets consisting out of 4 pages each. For the thicker book, each booklet I make will consist of 5 pages. It's just the same process as the previous booklets. Mark the center and mark where the holes will be. For these booklets, the holes are 2 cm apart to get an even number of holes. For this book, I made 11 booklets. Now it's time to fold them. It's important that the ends of the thread are on the outside of the booklet. When folding, make sure that the 2 innermost pages are on top of each other as precise as possible, and then press down. Use something with a blunt edge like a flexi ruler to make the spine more flat. Now you just repeat this process with all the other booklets. Next, we're going to attach all of the booklets together. But before you do that, check that they all fit into the book cover before continuing. Try to stack the booklets as neatly together as you can and clip them together using binder clips. Try to get the clips as close to the folded edges as possible. Push and pull on the booklets to make sure they are neat and in line with each other. Now we're going to take some of the scrap pieces of paper that we cut off from the pages earlier and use them to attach all the booklets together to create our text blocks. First, measure the width and length needed. For the width, make sure to measure at the bottom or top edge of the booklets. Also add a millimeter or 2 just to be safe. Mark the measurements on the piece of scrap paper and then cut it out. Place a piece of paper underneath the booklets to prevent glue from getting on the table. Put something heavy on the booklets to push them together. The next part I didn't film that well, but I'll show you a better view with the second book. Put glue on both the piece of paper and the spines of the booklets. Use a paintbrush to flatten it out. Then stick the piece of paper onto the side of the book. Now we just do the same process for the other text block. Measure, mark, cut, press down, glue. Here you can see a much better view of what I'm doing. When the glue is completely dry, you can remove the binder clips. Next, we're going to add our bookmarks. For the bookmarks, I'm using all-purpose gel glue. You can cut off any excess paper that you glued on that's sticking over. Put some glue onto the spine of the text block and stick the ribbon onto the spine. Next, take some leftover scrap paper and cut a piece to cover the ribbon. Place the piece of paper onto the spine and bend it over the edges of the book. Put some wood glue on the piece of paper and glue it onto the book. This is just to make sure the ribbon is very secure. Repeat this process for the other text block. Now it's time to glue the text blocks into the book covers. And here is where I made a huge mistake. You'll see in a few minutes. I printed out this beautiful picture on 160 GSM paper. This will be what's called the end sheet, which is the page that attaches the text block to the book cover. I'm going to be using Mod Podge to glue it into the book. Make sure to cut the page to size before gluing it on. Paint the whole first page with Mod Podge. See, this is why it's okay for the outside pages to be dirty or have marks on it. Make sure to put a piece of paper underneath the first page to prevent the Mod Podge from getting onto the rest of the book. Now, very carefully place the end sheet onto the text block. Mod Podge isn't a very forgiving glue on paper, so once it's glued on, it won't come off. Once it's pasted on, use binder clips to clip the corners of the pages together to prevent the corners from curling. Now we need to glue the rest of the end sheet to the book cover. This process is exactly the same for the back end sheet. But here is where I made a huge mistake. Instead of pressing the spine of the book cover against the spine of the text block before gluing on the end sheet, I kept the spine of the book cover open. You'll see why this is wrong in a few minutes. The sad thing is, I did the front end sheets and back end sheets of both books this way before I figured out that it's wrong. I couldn't understand why there was so much paper bended inside the spine, so I decided to look at what some of my other books looked like, and I realized my mistake. Now the difficult and also heartbreaking part was to fix it. Why was it heartbreaking? Well, I had to cut all of the beautiful end sheets so that I can pull the spine of the book cover against the spine of the text block. I could have printed new end sheets to paste over the other ones, but then it would have made it very thick, and I didn't want that. So I left it as is. cut the bookmarks to the length you prefer. I did, however, print the butterfly page on normal paper because the way it looked like really didn't work for me. But as I suspected, the thin paper wrinkled quite a bit from the Mod Podge, although I still think it's better than just leaving the end sheet as is. So yeah, this whole bookmaking process was successful up until the end sheets. But nonetheless, I'm happy with how it turned out. This red book I will be using as my next bullet journal. So that was my little two-part tutorial on how to reuse old book covers to create new books. I really hope this was helpful and I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like and also please leave a comment down below. If you like this kind of content and you would like to see more of it in the future, then I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe to my channel. Also feel free to give me a follow on Instagram, and if you guys have any suggestions on what you want me to create next, you can just leave it in the comments down below. That's it from me guys. Thank you so much for watching and subscribing, and then I will see you in the next video.